Okay. So, welcome, Savita, to the Humane Research Australia podcast. It's great to have you on, and I was really excited to interview you. You've got an amazing wealth of experience as an animal advocate and as an educator. I'm really looking forward to hearing all about it.
Oh,
Welcome.
thank you, Athena. I'm really glad to be here, and I really support Humane Research Australia, so I'm happy to be here.
Brilliant. So, um, basically, the first question I have is around why did you choose your field of research, and why did you choose to actually study diagnostics initially?
Okay. Well, so I originally did a degree in genetics at King's College London because I'm absolutely fascinated by genetics, in particular human genetics. I mean, just how, the simplicity of the genetic code being able to create the most complex forms of life is something that still astounds me. So I knew it was an area that I wanted to learn more about. I've always been a people person, and I've always wanted to work in a compassionate role. So that's what kind of eventually drew me to wanting to work for our National Health Service, or NHS, here in the UK. And it was in my final year of university when I heard about healthcare scientist careers, and I thought, that would fit what I wanted in a role completely. Because I mean, I'd always assumed that a research career in genetics would involve some form of animal testing. So I really just wanted to steer very clear from all of that. Now, a career in diagnostic genetics, and I appreciate that not everyone might know about this. It means that I would be involved in every decision-making process of individuals who attend the hospital, who either carry the risk of developing a disease, right, that has a genetic background, a genetic cause. They might already be suffering from it, or they are concerned that they might carry that risk for their children. So the results of their investigation, which is usually DNA extracted from blood or saliva, would be interpreted and reported by myself. And it might mean that I need to discuss it with other healthcare professionals and together provide kind of the best management plan available for that individual and their family. And, just to clarify, we normally only look at genetic diseases which have a single gene cause, right? And, the the real reason I kind of got into diagnostics is that I think the hope for all of us clinical scientists, especially in genetics, is that when we do prepare a positive report that shows that they do have, a genetic cause of their disease, that we're able to kind of write those magical words at the bottom of a report. There is a treatment, and it is true of certain conditions that we can treat. I mean, there are severe combined immunodeficiency, spinal muscular atrophy, which can be successfully treated with gene therapy. So we can correct the aberration in the genetic code. So yeah, a bit of a long one, but that's kind of why I wanted to get into diagnostic genetics in the first place.
Brilliant. I love that answer. Thank you. So can you please tell me a bit more about Medicine Without Cruelty? Why did you decide to set this up? What's your role with that organization, and what do you seek to achieve with that?
Sure. It's, yeah, my pleasure to talk about this. Medicine Without Cruelty is after I so I've changed careers. I am now an educator, and I'm a lecturer, and I teach health and social care management, which is an undergraduate degree. And in between leaving kind of the field of diagnostics, I did dip a toe into research as well before I left. That period before I started something new, I knew that I wanted to take everything that I've learned in the kind of the past decade of working in genetics, working in science, and understanding the field of research in general, and be able to educate just the public, whether it's students, who are undertaking life sciences degrees, or people who are considering maybe changing their research, or just educating the public in general, really on the dangers of animal testing to human health, because it is dangerous to human health that we are still testing on humans. It's not helping us move forwards, and we need more scientists to speak loudly about this. So I want to be able to provide a platform where I support other campaigns that are trying to do good, Humane Research Australia included, and also and also other articles, videos, who knows, maybe another podcast. But it's all about, now that I know, I really enjoy teaching and educating, it's kind of motivated me even more to have this organization set up. I mean, it's purely non-profit. It's just that I can get my words out there, really, for someone to hear, because they might be in the same predicament that I was. Once my eyes were truly kind of opened to the cruelty, it was hard to believe how easy it is to fall into that path. So what I mean is, after doing that kind of life sciences, genetics, or say biomedical science degrees, and to be honest, it's the students and graduates that I really want to make sure they hear me the loudest, screaming, you have a choice and you don't have to choose a life of animal testing. And after leaving clinical genetics and my subsequent research job, I just couldn't see a space for me to voice my concerns and help create real change, and I just want to make sure that I speak the loudest. That's it, really.
That's awesome.
So yeah,
That's awesome.
right now it's a one-woman organization, raising awareness to highlight the ineffectiveness of animal testing, and soon to be running my own campaign as well to highlight the number of universities who either don't animal test or they don't animal test and don't agree with it ethically, because that will have the power to change the way we teach science as well.
Brilliant. Okay, so that's a really interesting point that you made. So about looking at universities and educational institutions that that are actually embracing animal-free research. That's
yes, absolutely.
the alternative. The alternative is there. It's about highlighting and showcasing that. So can you tell me, is this a bit preliminary, seeing as you haven't actually launched the campaign, but can you tell me a bit about the ethos behind that campaign? What made you choose to take that approach?
Sure. Absolutely. So, it happened when I was applying to jobs. So, now that I'm a lecturer, before I wanted to lecture in what I've done all my life, which is, the medical sciences. So when I did apply, I made sure that I was applying to universities that did not animal test. What I found was they weren't, a number of them were not animal testing simply because of the cost of keeping an animal house. And it's not because they disagreed with it. So then I would have, a lot of them as well, collaborate with universities that are relatively local to them in terms of distance. And they would then collaborate on animal studies, right? So even though, their university would not animal test, you just see a list of papers, whether they've associated themselves with animal testing. And if you're a lecturer, and if, say, you don't provide your own research, or even if you don't, as a lecturer, you will have to teach what is, traditionally taught at the university, including their latest research. And that's why I think it's really important that if a university does not animal test, they also have to stand by it in their teaching, because, it's the future generations that are going to bring the end of animal testing. And it's because of all these alternatives that people have been thinking outside the box. If we keep that same rigid education that we've all been through, where is the room, where is that space to grow? right? Where is that space for them to think, okay, right, so this, say, rat model has never been working. What can we do next? And, artificial intelligence is here. Like, there's so much we could do in the future. Why not embrace it and actually use those skills to fine tune our teaching for the next generation? That's my ethos.
That's an amazing answer. Thank you so much. Okay,
Right.
so you touched on a lot of the questions that I'm going to be asking subsequently to this, so I'll
Sure,
just get on
yeah,
with them.
absolutely, yeah.
So, animal sentience is a key reason for opposing animal experimentation. Can you talk through any aha moments that you had where you could sort of, when you were looking at, say, your pets or other animals that you know, versus animals that you saw yourself in labs? Was there any sort of aha moment where you actually had this moment where you thought to yourself, oh, I can't do this? What was that like?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have had those moments, but they've come slowly and over time. And it's
Right.
helped me move careers. It has. So I've never been allowed pets, either growing up or living in rented accommodation. You're just never allowed pets, which is it's really sad. As soon as I can get a dog, or any animal for that reason, I will.
Yeah.
But
I
let me
can
tell
tell
you what I
you.
yeah, you can see
Yeah.
me with a
I rent. I rent as well. I come from a family of dog and cat lovers, but I rent and I can't have a dog or a cat. It's terrible.
It's sad. I
It
know.
is.
I know. Gosh, yeah, I know. There should be some sort of special license for landlords or something, some sort of special pet insurance. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Anyway.
so really, my kind of views on animal testing has purely come from a scientific point of view, that we are harming human health by continuing animal testing. But there have been moments when I have seen animals in labs. So, actually during my undergraduate degree, I witnessed the animal testing center, and it was an absolute shock seeing. So, Parkinson's disease is a degenerative neurological disease. So what you normally see with Parkinson's, one of the classic symptoms is those tremors. So they tend to shake a lot. And they had induced monkeys or macaques with Parkinson's disease, and you could see them exhibit those classic signs of the disease. And it honestly, that was shocking to see them in a small enclosed space, really confused. And even, and it doesn't matter if you've seen larger animals being hurt or smaller animals, because I've seen rats, I've held them, and they're so docile. I know people think of rats and they think of those kind of sewer rats who are like, the size of cats. No, we're talking about these fluffy, adorable rats that are just really warm and friendly creatures. And I think if actually people spent more time with animals, maybe they'd realize. But yeah, my personal beliefs about opposing animal experimentation has purely come from working in research and diagnostics, and realizing that it's not getting us where we need to. I don't know whether would you like me to kind of move on to what kind of gave me the ultimate aha moment? I need to leave this profession.
Yeah, well, it's up to you.
Yeah.
You said it was sort of gradual, but if you can think of a time where you just like, yeah, that's it, I'm done. I'm not going to take
So
this further. Yeah.
there's been moments, through my undergraduate degree that kind of moved me into human genetics, definitely. And I knew I'd never wanted to do animal testing. It's the stuff that keeps you up at night. And it was kind of after, so then when I worked in diagnostic genetics, it's quite interesting when you work in research and you think, oh, my research is completely human based, I'll never touch it. And you realize that you are part of a greater problem. And it could be the teams that you collaborate with, the person on the next bench over from you in the lab. You are somehow linked. And so, hence my point about all of us being able to shout loudly and support the right campaigns. But yeah, the last job I had before I pursued a career in teaching was a research fellow job in a transcriptomics lab. And just maybe I'll just give a bit of basic science for our listeners.
Yeah,
So,
that'd be
you know,
good.
it's kind of the central idea in biology, central rule that, you know, DNA, so our genetic code, everything that makes us us and all life, DNA makes RNA, and that RNA then makes protein. And that protein is the essential building blocks for all processes in the cell. And if it's all processes in the cell, it's all processes in the tissue, because cells make tissues make organs. We have complete organ systems, and hey presto, we've got a human body here. So suffice to say, if all three processes need to be tightly regulated, that DNA to RNA, RNA to protein. They need to be tightly regulated in order for us humans to function correctly, let's just say, or function. And what I was looking at in particular was, you know, whether we can detect changes in the DNA, which can cause specifically metabolic disease, and can we identify a reliable target for gene therapy? And particularly, you know, we're looking at the RNA, right? That middle step, and seeing, you know, is there a way that we can kind of target it to prevent that particular RNA from being later expressed as protein, right?
I get it. Yep.
Yeah. Now, it's the problem that I came to have is, you know, I was presented with an animal model, even though I said completely, I'm not getting involved in any animal research. This is strictly human. I will recruit patients to the study, all that. But, you know, I later realized that it was silly for me to even ask, and I shouldn't have joined, because although it opened my eyes, it made me realize that it's, for them, they felt it was unavoidable. Because with gene therapy, the standard is to have an animal model, so say maybe a rabbit, right, or a rat. So they'll have this rabbit that's been treated with that particular gene therapy, and then my job was then to take the sample and sequence. So remember the genetic code, we could sequence every letter to see, actually, has that RNA been, not suppressed, so that aberrant copy has been suppressed, or is it still there and the gene therapy hasn't worked? And I remember thinking, this, I couldn't do it. It's ridiculous. Now DNA makes every gene, right? So every short unit of DNA, right, which codes for a particular kind of facet of us, has different, might have so many different copies of RNA, right? So, which makes so many alternate copies of protein, right? It kind of, think about it like a tree, like it's branching off. You've got your tree stump as like kind of your DNA, your branches being genes, and then, you've got your kind of the smaller branches being RNA, and the fruit bearing it is the proteins, right?
I do. Yeah, that's a brilliant explanation. Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad that helped. Those branches are different on every tree, right? And you cannot say for certain that the human RNA profile, that we have, is 100% the same as a profile in a rabbit, right? And I just couldn't fathom why no one else could see my point. I felt like I was the only person just shouting from the rooftops, like, I don't get it. Why is this? It makes perfect scientific sense to me. It's not, we can't actually produce the same, we can't say for sure that the same effects are going to be true of in humans. Because what if there are, terrible effects downstream of that? How do you know you've targeted the correct the correct branches, so to say? But yeah, sorry, I digress. There's
That's a great digression. That sort of leads me into the next question, actually.
Yeah,
You were going
go
to
for
say
it.
something. Okay.
No, but that I was just gonna say that was my aha moment. That was my I can't
Yeah,
believe it. I can't believe so many people are fooled into thinking, this is the only way of, producing gene therapies or say toxicology studies. There is a different way, and we could probably get to it quickly.
that's very exciting
And
and
that's
very hopeful. This gives us
hopeful,
all
yeah.
reason to hope. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Sorry, what was your
that
question?
that leads me to the next question is around safety and around human health for these different therapies. As you mentioned, the gene is not going to be expressed in the same way in an animal as it would be in a person. So, what do you see as the massive safety concerns, the things that we should really be focusing on in terms of using animal models and in comparison to the health outcomes or the safety outcomes for using non-animal methods?
Okay, that's a very good question. And it's, while I'm here providing through my organization, I'm here providing information. I also need to make sure that my knowledge is up to date as well when it comes to NAMs or new approach methodologies, and making sure that, what I'm saying is 100% accurate. Now, this is my opinion that we can't judge, we cannot predict how our immune system is going to react to anything we put in front of it. Anything foreign that gets introduced to our body, everyone's reaction will be individual and different, right? I suppose is apt coming from a scientist with a genetics background. I'm always going to harp on about, personalized treatment, personal. And I think that, an animal model will not be able to express the same emotions, the same, effects, the same immune effects as us. What might be, say, toxic in our bodies might be absolutely fine in them. And you know what? And there have been countless examples of it, you know. So there was that Vioxx, that that arthritic drug that was introduced, and it was absolutely fine in animals, and it ended up, you know, giving a quite, a substantial number of the population cardiac arrests, strokes. People did
Wow.
die from it, and it was the level of cardiotoxicity. And there are ways that we can get around it. So there was a study a few years ago where they tried in silico modeling. So they actually use computer modeling. So with all the scans of all the heart and all the ECG, so the electrocardiogram data. So that's what you see in kind of classic hospital TV shows, because you'll see that kind of little what's it called? Those graphs where it goes up and down. You can tell that's related to whether that person's alive or not on their heartbeat, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And if you collect enough data from the population, right, we can be able to use that and predict. And also with the advent of, with AI kind of being put into, say, general use, and more people becoming more aware of it, you know, it's one thing to train a machine to read a data set, and another thing entirely to have sort of an artificial intelligence being able to kind of scan the data it has and be able to predict whether a compound will cause will you know will cause buildup within the heart or not, because that
Right.
buildup is going to lead to toxic buildup, and therefore, compression of, say, the arteries around the heart, and that's what leads to heart attacks, other things. So yeah, I'm not saying that one technique wins out. I was lucky
Mhm.
enough to hear about organoids as well when I worked in research, and organoids are a fascinating area of research as well. And just a very quick one in case our readers don't know. They
Absolutely.
are essentially, they're essentially mini organs, right? And it's a kind of a self-organized tissue. So they've been derived from stem cells. So when when fetuses are growing within the mother's womb, after like 5 or 6 days, within a week of, within a week of conception, you are just a bag of cells. And those cells can differentiate into anything, that those cells might end up becoming your heart, your lung, your skin. And so what we want to do is derive those kind of immature cells, you could say, and that's what's known as stem cells, because we can coax them into growing into, say, a cornea, which is like, say the outer part of our eye, or we can grow them into a brain. So that's fascinating, right? That if we can coax them by giving the right nutrients, growth factors, etc., they can then mimic the key kind of functional, structural, and biological complexity of an organ. And that's fascinating, because that's a problem that we have with cell culture. That's it's two-dimensional, right? And we need more information out of it. So if we can recreate the anatomy of an organ, right, it makes it invaluable for, say, modeling the adverse effects of a drug. So like, I don't know, what kind of the big ones that we look out for with toxicity testing is our gut, right? Because how it's going to be absorbed in our gut is going to be the biggest problem. So gastrointestinal tract, our liver, because our liver is a very hardworking organ right there. We need to know, that's the one that's filtering out our toxins. So if you've been out on a night out, had a few glasses of wine, it's your liver that's doing all the work afterwards. And also your kidneys, because your kidneys help fluid balance in your body as well. So, whether your salt intake's too high or too low, it needs to regulate the water balance accordingly. So those, they're just a few of the main areas where you could then develop an organoid or an organ, a miniature organ, and see how it crosses these barriers, like, say, a new chemical or compound, right? And there's some great examples of his application. So they design, you could design, say, a human kidney organoid and see whether you could actually put a toxin into that organoid and then see whether actually it works or not, whether you see that kind of buildup of that toxin or not, and measure it accurately. And so, these organoids can then be used for, say, kidney toxicity screening easily. Wow. So there's a lot going on that we could do. We could maybe even grow a patient's own cells, right? Even something as simple as that, culturing it in a dish. There's so much to be hopeful for in the future. And my hope is that we get to teach it more in universities.
Yes, absolutely.
And schools and colleges, why not?
Yeah. Teach them young, teach them early.
Yeah. Here's your pipette. Let's get going.
Absolutely. So this is actually not on my questions list, but it's just something that occurred to me, is that there is a little bit of bias in terms of education, in terms of how we discuss animals, how we talk about animals, and that sort of informs how we teach and educate about animals as simply resources and as things, rather than as beings and that type of thing. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on that. There's a lot of discussion around that, around communicating about animals in education or in the media setting, which I'm sort of starting to learn about, which is fascinating. I wanted what you think about that.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for raising that question. It's something that I've thought about quite a lot over the past year, how animals have been discussed in my presence, say at conferences, say in research settings, and how dehumanizing it is. And it's we call them a disease model, And so that word model gets passed around like it means nothing. And it's going back to what I said, that when I was working as a diagnostic scientist, because I was so removed from it, I didn't feel like I was involved in it. But I knew after my research, let's just say my temporary job in research, I knew I couldn't go back to clinical diagnostics, because even though, I would sequence DNA from a patient and have a look at what changes are causing their disease, right? The specific work I did not involve animals, but it doesn't prevent it either. And I think that's what scientists need to realize, that they need to be aware of, is their work truly cruelty free? Even though what I might find is, say if I need to look at the literature to see whether that DNA change has been seen before, right? So it might be seen in other individuals with the same disease, then the statistical probability of that gene change, that genetic change being causative of that person's disease is infinitely higher, right? If you see loads of people having the same symptoms and they've got the same DNA change, right? Bingo, we've got it, right?
Yeah.
But we also have animal studies as well. And so what we would find is we would have to look at the literature. And so they need to develop guidance on how well can you use that as evidence for patients, right? So say if they have developed a rat model to knock out a particular gene. And frankly, the clinical signs and symptoms are not always exact and they're not, because they are different to us. And I think you're right about language. It was just kind of put there for us that, okay, if you see it in a larger animal and you see any sort of change, i.e., I don't know, a larger animal might cough and that might cause a disease, and they've been made as a model of, and I say model with inverted commas, of a particular gene knockout, then there we go. That's it. That's our cause, right? And I think it's not relatively sound, and obviously, as scientists, it's not the only piece of evidence we use. But I just think we need to be careful about using that kind of evidence in the first place, right?
Absolutely.
And also the other point was that you don't know the downstream effects of what you find. So say if we find something of kind of uncertain significance, you don't really know whether it's causing this person's disease. You have no control over whether that doctor might be also a researcher, and they might want to say, right, we're going to just put it in a disease model, which means they'll put it in an animal, right, and see what happens to it. And I was like, I cannot be involved in any sort of cruelty, right, whether I can control it or not. It's just, I feel a bit more of those people who are like teetotal. I can't touch it, I can't look at it. And I didn't realize that I was surrounded by it in that previous career. And it goes back to your point about language as well, that researchers, scientists, people in that sphere, they become desensitized to it in the first place by hearing model, model, model. Here's this mouse, here's this rat. They don't, they might never see a picture of it. And the people who are handling the animals are separated. So, the animal technicians, everyone. And so the people who think their hands are clean, right, don't realize what they are doing and the research they're producing has a direct effect on providing not accurate results for humans, and B, torturing animals as well. And I've before I started teaching health and social care management, I was also teaching science. So I taught science to students who wanted to go become an allied health profession. So that's for us, that means nursing, midwifery, paramedics, physiotherapists. So kind of, everyone else who's in a patient-facing role. And, I explained to them what exactly it means and, why is it we don't necessarily have cures for everything in the world right now. And I spoke in depth about animals, and I chose my words really carefully, right? If you're specific about it, right? And if you say it clearly, rat, mouse, beagle, not just canine, right? But it's an actual dog, and they largely use beagles in research.
Mm.
And
Yep.
putting that together, that image together with the teaching as well, it really forces them to see it as a whole, right? And that's really the point I wanted to make. And a lot of them were horrified, and a lot of them were like, that's frankly really disturbing. And
Most people are, aren't they?
sorry,
Really,
it's
most people are. They are
most people
horrified
are.
by it.
They are. And it's great to hear that, they were like, if I get into university, when I get into university, if I ever have to do a research project, I'm going to check everything. And it's just so nice to hear those things. It's not me forcing them in any way against animal testing, right? I'm just providing them a balanced view. And it's not my fault that the balanced view means that it's clear to see to everyone that animal testing is no longer working, no longer effective, no longer, I mean, it never was, never is, right? And that we can do so much more for human health. Sorry, that was a bit of a long answer.
Oh, that was a brilliant answer.
There's just been so many times in my life when I know I could see exactly what you said about the teaching not being not being as good as we want it to be.
Yes. Well, you're evening out the balance for sure with a more
Oh,
balanced
good.
perspective on it all
One
and
class at a
explaining it in
time.
a very, very, very well to people very clearly.
Oh, good.
So my next question is around AI actually. So the AI revolution seems to be very integral to diagnostic and personalized testing. So, do you think that this will actually help to end animal testing sooner rather than later, using the use of AI in testing? Or
I
is that
think
too much of a new area?
I think it has the potential to impact. Already you can see that AI is impacting loads of various aspects of our society. So you can see it in social media, right? There's AI everywhere. If anyone's ever had a Snapchat, they can see they've even got one of those My AI icons there. So AI is everywhere, and it will impact the field of animal testing, and it can definitely contribute to a reduction. But I don't think any one method will ever reduce. Well, it's never going to be just one method that's going to prove effective for human health. I mean, I can't wait till the day that happens. But at the moment, what needs to happen to increase the accuracy, say, of, the kind of that preclinical, that drug development pipeline. So if you think about it, that, first we need to identify potential drugs before we start to use, unfortunately, with the current drug pipeline, before it's tested on humans, it gets tested on animals. Now, how can we replace that? And I think at the moment it's going to be a multitude of different what's it called, models, right? And that models could be computer generated, so AI, right? And what AI could do is it can aid in the development and refinement of, firstly, drug screening. So for identifying drugs which will not cause toxicity, right, in a human. It can aid in the development and refinement of alternative testing methods. So depending on the drug, the aspect of the body that we're targeting, what AI could do is potentially match the correct, say, investigation that could be used. So we could use it that way, kind of say, an instructor would kind of say, your personal training instructor would be like, okay, these are the number of repetitions you need to do, and this is how heavy a load you'll be using.
I see.
And perhaps AI could do something like that. I mean, that it could do massively. I mean, there's probably more things that I haven't even delved into, but we talked about computer simulations of organs and the human body. We could even create a human body if we wanted to, and simulate that online. And also there's, such a thing as tissue engineering, which we currently do, which AI could definitely aid in the development of. And so that data that comes out of it will be invaluable. And so it starts to kind of get the government and get research institution, get them to pry their fingers off of animal experimentation. And how we do that, one finger by one finger is doing it through these different modalities.
Through
Education. Yeah. I think most of my talks does come back to that for sure.
So that brings me to my next question about what do you feel hopeful for in terms of the future of research and the end of animal experimentation? You sort of touched on these areas before, but do you feel hopeful about particular things in the near future of the next few years to decade?
I do feel hopeful. I think there's a lot in this world to be hopeful about, and I know, especially in Britain, and I teach people who work in our National Health Service, so people who work in health systems, and there's always something to grumble about, right? And we need to be able to see the glass half full when it comes to the end of animal experimentation, particularly because just like a health career, it's so easy to burn out, because you feel like you're knocking against locked doors. And we need more people with fresh enthusiasm to pick things up again, like yourself, Athena, and myself, people who are, relatively new, who actually want to do good. And the more people we inspire, the more people will want to come and join this. And so we can tip that balance towards the end of experimentation. So, you can see this happening even in in other countries. So look at America, look at the FDA Modernization Act. So, the bill authorizes the use of alternatives to animal testing, right? And that could include, say, cell-based assays. It's incredible. And computer models. If it is possible at a government level, anything's possible, right?
Absolutely.
Because it happens from the top down. If we get the word from them, it trickles down into research labs across the country. And so that's what the ultimate hope is.
Very exciting and very, very hopeful. And I share that view that, the future is bright and that we'll be able to get rid of animal testing. And it's all about glass half full perspective, definitely.
For sure. It's really important to keep that passion and enthusiasm up for a cause that's close to a lot of us.
Absolutely. And you could equally say that for being an animal rights advocate or for campaigning in general for anything like that, which is sort of my background. campaigning.
Oh, right.
And so, you know, if you were to tell young people who are campaigning for an end to animal testing, an end to
Yes.
animal experimentation, what would you tell them to encourage them to keep going and to be positive and keep that positive glass half full perspective?
Oh, good question. Good question. I was recently approached by a group of individuals, and it's the power of social media. I'm really grateful. I need to do more for social media. That, I was approached by um these students who want to end the reign of puppy mills. And for people who don't know it, these puppies live in quite some of them in quite horrible conditions. So
Yes,
there's
it's
all
awful.
sorts
They
of
have that here as
it,
well. It's awful.
uh, it's awful, it is. And animal rights is across the board, whether it's, say, the end of puppy mills, the end of greyhound racing here in the UK. There's a lot of work to do, right? And there is strength in numbers. And don't feel that just because you have chosen a particular aspect of animal rights, that you can't connect with other individuals and other groups, because they will be facing the same issues that you will be facing, right?
Mm.
Coming across, like I said, locked doors, trying to speak to people and it not quite working. And there should be spaces that we can learn from each other, right? So don't be afraid to connect with other animal rights organizations, even if they don't necessarily fit with your own goals. It's always important to talk to different individuals and see, maybe they thought of a different strategy for campaigning that, that you could use, or maybe put a different spin on it. And so, variety, creativity, that's a spice of life. So having more creative individuals on your team, or even if they're not even in the same country as you, that is what's going to keep the enthusiastic behavior up on a high, so to speak.
Brilliant.
So
Yeah.
good, I'm glad you've enjoyed it. It's been really nice talking to you, Athena, and you've come up with some great questions.
I know. Well, I've loved talking to you as well. So, and I see a lot of
Good.
parallels with what you're doing and what Humane Research Australia are doing and the campaigning that we're going to be doing and also what you're doing. So, would love to have some more collaborative chats where
Yeah, we should. Yeah.
building up connections and energizing each other. I think that's really important, considering it can be quite dark and quite depressing work at times. It's very good to have that connection. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Athena. There's so many connections with what I teach, because I teach a lot of care workers.
Right.
And working in care, you can get what they call it the caregiver syndrome, that you yourself end up feeling quite upset, because you're taking on so much of someone else's life. I think quite similarly that can happen with animal rights as well.
Definitely.
A lot of yeah. Next week I'm speaking to Camp Beagle.
Oh,
so that's
cool.
They're protesting against the beagle factory. Well, I call it a factory. The ones that are selling beagles off to different research companies.
All right.
It's terrible. So yeah, they've invited.
They do amazing work.
Chat.
Yeah.
They do, and they have individuals who've gone to prison for not just via Camp Beagle, but also previously, because they protested other animal rights activities. So these people, when I think, okay, I'm dedicated, I see them, I think, there's more to do.
Yeah.
More to be energized about.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom and all of your knowledge with us. It's amazing. That was a really cool chat.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, good.